Good evening, and welcome to Uncivil Disobedience. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Kennedy Cooper.
Hey, check this out. I have a guest in person. So I want to emphasize that, like, when I started getting more serious about the media, I set up to be able to have someone else here with a second microphone, etc. And then a pandemic happened. So I've never done this before. So
That makes a
2 years
difference.
later.
But yeah, I'm Call. I just visited Kennedy for clout, so
Yeah.
that's the only reason why I'm here. I'll just be in the back.
Hey, visit Kennedy, go to work for Russian TV. It's an easy choice. You have to go with Kennedy every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you were also offered a spot to speak on the Young Turks.
Oh, definitely.
And you turned that down.
Yeah. Well, any of that. Seems like there's a lot going on there.
They have their own problems to sort out at the Young Turks.
Those of you out there watching may know Call as Book Syrup on Twitter, where they post a lot of infamous things about golf, especially.
Yes. There was a good stretch where there was a lot of talk about militant vegans.
Oh God.
Oh
yeah.
Well, before we get into any heavy topics like militant vegans or golf, here's a reminder that there's a Patreon to support the show.
Yes, there definitely is.
If you're a vegan, if you want to donate, don't take anything personally.
Come on. This is, of course, the day my computer decides not to cooperate with me at all. I don't know what's going on.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're taking the steps towards professionalism. And that means promoting the Patreon. And sometimes we're just gonna do that in the sloppiest manner possible. That's okay too.
Well, my internet doesn't want to work.
What is the link? Let's just tell people what it is. We'll post it later.
So the link is patreon.com/eclecticradical.
There you go, folks. Support the show. We'll talk more about why some other time, but do it.
Well, there are some good reasons. We may be the only show left that is not funded in some way, either by big media or a foreign media organization.
Yeah, because we're not funded at all. So that's how you know. That's how you know the money is clean.
There isn't any. Yeah.
But
you can tell that from our high production values that we're not taking any corrupt money whatsoever because we have no money.
But we promise, if we did make some money off this show, that we will continue to push the anti-golf agenda.
Yeah,
definitely. You have to
get rid of all of those golf courses. There's not even a need for one.
You
have to. Even if it were ethical, we don't need that. It doesn't need to.
I think we can have one. Like, that's how I feel about a lot of excessive stuff. Like, we can have one super yacht for the whole world. We can have one golf course. We can have one castle. We could just get rid of the rest of them. They're weird anyway.
Yeah. No, so this means that we can have one stupid Disney theme park, and we have to get rid of all the others.
Yes, all the others go away, and there's just one Disney World.
Not one park, just one of the rides that are there. So you have to pick which one.
No, just one of the theme worlds, specifically Star Wars World. Yeah, just one golf course. And if you're rich, it doesn't matter if you have to fly to get there. You have a private jet or whatever. Those are the only people that play golf.
Yeah.
I posted that people should release invasive species onto their local golf course. And so people
That's a
kind of
good
got
one.
upset with me about this
Yeah.
because that's a slightly irresponsible thing to say in some people's estimation. But I just want to say for the record that I stand by that take.
Really?
Yeah, I
Hey, if you're reaching into a hole for a ball, you should have to wonder if there's a king cobra in that hole.
You should.
Oh my god.
Also, like, every golf course should just get overrun with kudzu to the point where they can no longer exist. Come on, think about it.
Good idea.
Well, that would be. There was that one person on Twitter who had that idea that all golf courses should be turned into sex forests. And the kudzu overgrowth would be an important first step.
Yeah, I don't know who that one person was who actually made that original meme, but they're correct.
That's
what
based.
needs to happen with that area.
It's extremely based.
Yeah.
And yeah, the kudzu would help because, like, the thick overgrowth, it'd be easy to find private places to get a little bit of.
It's much more comfortable if there's thick overgrowth and you're not just laying on rocks and sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just a sex forest that's a big open field just feels off.
Give people their privacy.
Let people decide how much exhibitionism is really for them.
Millennial Lefty is pointing out there's already on golf courses or alligators on golf courses, to which all I could say is good. Good.
They should
Now, to be fair, in Florida, the alligator and Louisiana, the alligator is native, and the golf course and the golf players are the invasive species.
Exactly. Think about it like that next time before you come at me for saying something wildly inappropriate on the internet. Okay.
If Donald Trump is eaten by an alligator at one of his golf clubs in Florida, hey, he chose to build the golf club in Florida.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he also chose to walk around looking like that.
And if you were an alligator, wouldn't you want to take a bite out of that just because it looks so odd?
Look at all that suit, that fine linen that he's always walking. You'd be like, that's like that fancy packaging. That's like when the chocolates come in the gold foil.
Ferrero Rocher.
That's a perfect analogy for what it would be like for an alligator to consume Donald Trump, because that's like such like the ultimate kind of overrated chocolate that's like kind of good but not nearly as good as like it sort of purports itself to be.
And I don't know where all this is coming from. We're usually not shock jocks at all, but thank you for bearing with us, folks.
Yeah.
Carl's been bringing it out of me.
I mean, yeah, why not? I hate golf, and you just talk about it that way, however you want.
Well,
we literally just spent the last 3 days just talking mad shit over here.
Yeah, it's true. We talked about vegans, and specifically militant vegans. I'm not trying to defend it here.
One thing actually came to mind to me just now.
Oh, yeah?
Which is I can think of one genuine compliment to give Joe Biden, which is from an anti-golf point of view, he is an improvement over
Oh, dang. His golf policy is better.
Oh, really?
Think about it.
What is he getting out of it? What do you think?
Well, it's not getting. It's not. It's just that it's not that it's that much better, but it's just that Donald Trump's presidential policy towards golf was very pro golf.
Yeah, of course.
And he was playing it all the time.
He was out there, talking about golf, and yeah.
Well, golf neutral is better than pro golf.
That's true. We need to get to like the anti-golf You know, the next
Hey,
person elected needs to be very anti-golf.
Joe's not out there playing it in public. And, you know, to have a president who's not out there playing golf in public, that can't be underestimated. Do you know how long it's been since we had
He's too busy eating ice cream. He can't play golf. He has to, you know,
Yeah,
eat
actually,
at least 5 bags of ice cream.
Hagen, I want to dig into this a little bit. Because Barack Obama played golf.
Yes.
Bill Clinton played golf.
Yes.
Did Bush Senior?
Poppy played golf.
Poppy played golf publicly.
Poppy was an oil man who did lots of business on the golf course and who had a presidential golf course at Kennebunkport and a bunch of other stuff.
This is more of a win than it seems like to have a golf neutral president.
Yeah. Okay. I'll think about it.
You have to go back to. You have to go back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt or Harry Truman or somebody like that for the last president who didn't play golf while in office.
Is that because it just wasn't really popular?
No. FDR would have played golf, but he was in a wheelchair.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Harry Truman was not a golf playing sort of person. He's one of the very few people to come from a really genuine sort of middle class sort of background and actually end up in politics. He wasn't a golf kind of guy so much. But
his politics may not have all been perfect, but he was pretty sincere about the majority of them. So
and then Eisenhower is a military thing because it was one of the things that you had in every country near the military base was a golf course for officers. Mm-hmm. But Eisenhower was a huge golf player. Eisenhower was the one who had the golf course added to Camp David and who was the one who changed the name from Camp Xanadu, which was FDR's name for it, to Camp David.
The much more normal sounding name of Camp David.
Well, so he thought
draws
it
less
more modest.
Conspiratorial suspicion.
he thought it sounded more modest, but I mean, it's his middle name. Could he have been more arrogant? It would have been more obvious to call it Camp Ike, but not more arrogant.
Yeah, for sure.
But he thought
Camp
everybody.
David, that's like, if anything was going to get me to believe in secret cabals of politicians having orgies, that place kind of makes me suspicious.
So Eisenhower supposedly thought that Camp Xanadu sounded too rich. FDR was legitimately rich. We can't forget that. But Eisenhower was kind of a snob about not being rich. And so he thought that Camp Xanadu sounded too rich for the president of the United States. And he thought Camp David sounded less rich. It sounded more like a real summer camp somewhere. I don't know why he thought that. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I've never been to a summer camp with a name that boring. They usually have a name that reflects something about the place, you know?
Holcomb Valley, Lost Valley, those are the summer camps I remember going to.
Hummingbird Music Camp was one of my favorite places to go in the summers as a teenager. Yeah. You know, that distinctive name says something about where it is.
That's
I don't
true.
know.
It does. It's true. Yeah. Now that I've given Joe Biden some rare praise by acknowledging his golf neutral stance.
Yeah, you got to start with. You know.
Let's go ahead and say that one thing has really been disappointment to me, and that's where's this harm reduction that people kept promising.
Especially, let's talk about COVID, because I got more money and more protection from Donald Trump. Why do I have to say that? People are going to try to take things like that out of context too and be like, you're defending Trump. No, I hate Trump. I hated Trump every day he was in office. I talked shit about him a lot. I'm just wondering why Joe Biden is somehow worse. That's all.
It seemed like, I mean, because we said it ourselves, being better than Trump was a really low bar, and we didn't think that was necessarily good enough to make Biden president. But he hasn't even reached that low bar yet.
No.
Yeah.
Deporting 3,000 people per day.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to break Obama's record. Forget worse than Trump. He's trying to break Obama's record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. He bombed Somalia 4 times in one weekend, and most people still don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's never any coverage, for that.
Just not
Yeah,
talked about for some reason.
They don't talk about any of Joe Biden's bombings.
Yeah.
It gets like a blip.
Yeah.
Like if you're like scrolling like the BBC extra feed all the way to the bottom. It's down there.
But think about that. I bet that you can't necessarily name off the top of your head what conflict we're actually in Somalia. So why did we bomb it 4 times in one weekend?
And everyone will always well, when it happened a while ago, immediately people jump to, oh, well, it's fine that he did that because of, the terrorists there and all this shit. And it's like that. That's the comments that I got back when I posted about
I've seen those
Just
same
saying,
comments from people.
You
and
know
it's just
what?
like, how long are you going to go on with this without actually researching what's going on there or the history or anything like that?
So let's talk about Somalia for a minute, because we have a history with the quote unquote Somalian pirates.
Yes.
And this relates to all of this shit.
And before they were pirates, they were warlords. Let's remember that, because we love to use that name warlords for people we don't like.
Yeah, and who a lot of them people should be called maybe more like indigenous territory defenders. So the Somalian pirates, I want to talk about that for a second, because that has been that was the media campaign that drummed up a lot of the recent anti-Somalia sentiments. So those pirates were protecting the water because Somalia does not have an adequate coast guard, and Italy dumps radioactive waste on the coast of Somalia regularly. So the people of Somalia have taken it into their own hands to try to prevent things of that nature. That's just one example of several countries in the area that do things like this, to be clear. But I want to emphasize that one because it's extremely disturbing that they are dumping radioactive waste on another country's doorstep and pretending like they're not doing anything.
Let's also note that Somalia used to be Italy's colony. So when Italy dumps radioactive waste on Somalia, it's kind of bad sportsmanship.
Yeah.
It's literally, they're saying fuck you to Somalia because they're still mad that they don't get to pillage all the resources that they really wanted.
Exactly.
And so because they don't have a strong formal coast guard of any kind or a strong formal navy of any kind, the people of Somalia have taken to forming their own informal navies and coast guards to protect against this sort of behavior. And it has been successful. It has been successful. And that's why they've been labeled as pirates and terrorists. And before that, warlords for defending the land before the sea. The same thing. It was always the same shit. And so this bombing of Somalia, this conflict with Somalia, all of this relates to this people trying to protect what resources they still have after imperialism, trying to build a country that can function and, just make something for themselves. But other countries wanting to continue to exploit them. And that's the only reason for these bombings. And that's why you don't hear anything about them. and the only things that you do hear are wild propaganda like the pirate stories.
We're fighting terrorism when we bomb Somalia. That's what they keep saying.
That's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like they try to connect every possible thing to terrorism these days, too. I mean, I remember when you would never have tried to connect drugs to terrorism, but then W came along, and W is like, if you're buying drugs, you're funding terrorism. Okay, thanks, cokehead.
No, if you're buying drugs, you're funding the U.S. military in more cases than you're funding a terrorist cell, especially if you buy opiates.
But I mean, George W. Bush used his not insignificant wealth to personally fund drug dealers to a significant degree while he was governor, in the sense that he was not sober yet and was partying a little hard. And that's not something that he wanted to talk about, but he wanted to be hard on drugs.
Yeah.
And it's a little hypocritical. Not that
this is
shock that our politicians are hypocritical.
No, that's not very shocking.
Chris, this article I'm posting in private chat, if you'd post it in the comments, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
This is about the Somalian pirates. It's a relatively centrist article by The Atlantic, so you don't have to even wonder if it's like heavily biased, to make them sound good, but it kind of gives a picture of what's really going on, which is that these are, informal groups forming a sort of coast guard to protect their waters. And even The Atlantic was willing to say this in 2009. So there you go, folks.
Well, was The Atlantic owned by the Emerson Collective yet in 2009?
God, that's a good question.
Because the people who own them now, the Emerson Collective, who are a really shady outfit, they do a lot of business with Saudi Arabia. And an unknown amount of money that went into buying the Atlantic came from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So if this article piques anyone's interest out here, you read it and you start to think maybe there is something more to this, I definitely encourage you to investigate further, because you can find much further left sources talking about this. But I always like to open conversations like this with a nice centrist source if I can, just to prove that, even the center saw that there was something wrong here. And that, there's something so clearly dishonest about this narrative that even people that are not on our side at some point said something about it.
Remember in 2009, though, The Atlantic was still writing about Mossad death squads, which they don't write about anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that there have been, that it was definitely before the Emerson Collective, and that there have been some changes.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Because I just remembered that, The Atlantic used to write about Mossad death squads, and now they don't anymore.
Mm-hmm. They used to write about some very interesting stuff in The Atlantic. They also had some pieces about, Iraq that were kind of telling back in the, especially towards the late Bush era. The Atlantic had some pieces about the failure of the Iraq War that were very scathing. And you just wouldn't see something like that in The Atlantic today. That's for sure.
The Atlantic helped expose parts of the torture scandal, and now they're pretty much pro-torture.
Yeah. And this is what I know, both you and I on various issues, Chris, are sometimes accused of saying fascism too easily. But folks, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about a slide into fascism that's going on all around us, and that, has infiltrated so many things, our government, our media, etc.
Well, it's infiltrated our political arguments and our thinking, even as people who don't necessarily like the system. I can't tell you how many people have these really hardcore ideas about crime or sex work or a few other things that come from these very reactionary ideas in society that have been normalized by both parties.
Yeah.
Recently someone was going back at me about, from the person from the Young Turks who's been getting all that backlash, Anna.
Oh, yes.
She recently said this like weird thing about, the homeless,
Yes.
there's gonna be crime and like all this stuff, and it was just like this is some dog whistling bullshit, and this is like, I mean, it's just like and then someone was like arguing with me that she's just looking out, and we were like, I was just like, no, she's actually not, and they accused me of like being on that. I was like, I don't get on anyone's side with any of this at all. I'm always just like, see something and I make a comment based on what I know is fucked up. I mean, that was those comments are really horrible. You can't go online or anywhere like on a broadcast and be like, homeless people are criminals inherently. Like, this is inherently going to cause crime.
It's like, oh.
It's like, why aren't you talking about the people that got them there and like the landlords and that situation? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like
the kinds of things the Young Turks used to talk about 10 years ago when we hardly had any left media, and I loved y'all back then. God, I there was hardly anything worth watching at that time, and I love the Young Turks, and it's so sad now because now I literally feel like Shank is saying evil stuff. I don't know how else to put it. When he talked about aligning with the right.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What was so hilarious? What was so hilarious about that is this is what all his friends, not so much Schenk himself, though he's taken his friend's side in various things, but all Schenk's friends have been going after people on this whole idea that Jimmy Dore wanted to team up with the right. And that was bad. And we had to drive Jimmy Dore out of all our spaces and drive all Jimmy Dore fans out of all our spaces.
So let's be clear about this. I'm not a Jimmy Dore fan, and I always make that clear. But
and I'm not either, but
I'm not either.
But he platformed a fascist adjacent person one time out of a naive set of reasons.
See, so
that's
two times. But the first time was with Mike Cernovich, who I believe he misjudged at the time.
And I think he had a similar kind of misjudgment with the other situation.
Yes.
And I don't think that he's entirely 100% such a fraud that he did that on purpose. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was like a legitimate mistake, and that he pretty quickly backpedaled from it. He wasn't trying to form a red-brown alliance. He did it. At first, he was kind of like, well, I defended like platforming him slightly, and then he was kind of like, you know what, this isn't worth it, and he just backed down. And so that's a lot different than Shank literally saying we should form a red-brown alliance, and we can quibble about the other stuff later, or however he put it exactly, which means that we can die, right, Carl? Queer people like us can die, and then Shank will have healthcare, right? Like something that's kind of what he seems to mean.
Yeah, like if you're not taking the time, like I'm all for like de-radicalization, but like people who are not de-radicalized, who are like at a certain level, it's like if you're like having them interact with someone who's marginalized in any way, like if they haven't taken care of that, and like honestly shouldn't even be in any public spaces, honestly, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean,
like broadcasting, they should be dealing with their own.
Definitely.
Like dealing with that, and then like making amends and like outing their right wingers and doing all that shit. They shouldn't be, Like,
I
anyway.
don't even think there are other people who identify as left who I still think have not made a significant break from their past to really platform themselves as left and shouldn't be on the air. And I'm not going to name names because I don't want to give them more oxygen than they're already getting.
Yeah.
But these are people who are genuine shock jocks who say things to get people riled up, but then say, well, I was just joking, or you were taking it out of context, or this is what I really meant.
Yeah.
And that's the best analysis. In the worst analysis, if you think that it's bad, and I agree with the person who was making this statement, I think Chuck Modiano is right that Bill Maher should not have Ben Shapiro on the show so much, particularly when he does not put the left equivalent of Ben Shapiro on the show.
Exactly. Yeah, when's the last time he had Bree Joy Gray? Right?
Exactly.
When's the last time he had someone like that on to balance it out? You know, when's the last time he had Nina Turner on?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure he's ever had Nina Turner on. I'd have to check.
Just saying.
No. Now I'm really curious.
Yeah. You know,
most of the liberals he's had on are people who I would say are in most ways to the right of where Bill Maher used to express himself as being.
Yeah.
And now he just seems to be about that same place that all his guests used to be, the liberal ones. And now he's platforming a lot of people. He's always platformed some people, but he's platforming a lot of people now who are a lot further to the right. And he's not platforming a lot of left people.
Yeah, that's what I see also. Like, there's a lot of people that Bill Maher could have on. I'm not saying me. I'm not famous enough for that show. You know, it's not like I'm sitting here like bitter because like, yeah, I've never been, Cruz has never been invited on. You know what I mean? Like, but like there are people on the left that are notable.
Yeah.
That have put in the years of, you know, being out there talking about this stuff and that are liked enough to get, you know, occasionally picked up by various mainstream media and given a moment. He has. Has Bill Maher even had Sam Cedar on, who is like
he's just making
as
space for
thinly, still acceptably progressive as it gets?
So let me think about some of the sort of progressive-y people he's had on. He in 2016. Well, no, before 2016, Bill Maher had Bernie Sanders on like once or twice. And in 2016, he made sort of noises like he liked Bernie and wanted to have him on the show, but then he caught Clintonitis at the same time everybody else in the media did.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that moment, and you could all tell where it was because it was around the same time on MSNBC that Rachel Maddow stopped doing that really great Flint reporting
and
started talking about all Russia all the time.
Yeah.
Which is a real tragedy.
I decided I had to look up Bill Maher's 2021 guests. His first episode had Kellyanne Conway on it. Mm-hmm. What the fuck is this? He's getting Joe Scarborough on there.
So when he was on Comedy Central and ABC, Joe Scarborough was like his go-to guy. He was there week after week after week. He was almost always on the panel. They are buddies.
He has not had one notable leftist media personality on, period.
He hasn't had Nina on since 2015.
He has had a terrifying panel of like right-wing journalists and fucking freaky, bizarro libertarians and shit every night. He had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, who has been credibly accused of sexual assault.
Yes.
Something that just is being swept under the rug by certain people. Great. I guess that's what you like. Honestly, Bill Maher seems like a guy who would do something that if I described it, I could be sued for libel or whatever.
See, I don't know anything personally about Bill Maher. He has what seems like a creepy vibe to me.
Mm-hmm.
That creepy vibe has gotten worse as he's gotten older.
Yeah.
But it was never not there at all. It was always a big part of his quote unquote edge.
Bill Maher is a man that I would not be comfortable wearing my 5-inch inseam shorts around. I'm being honest too. I just want to be clear. Like, it's a joke, but also I really would not. Also, Millennial Lefties in the comments says Nina was on Bill Maher the last time in 2015.
Yeah,
that seems like an obvious miss. And when we talk about Nina Turner, we are talking about someone that is not considered left enough by a lot of people on the left these days.
In fact,
so we're not even talking about a radical person to bring on your show, really.
No. In fact, just the other day, there was another round of podcaster drama on Twitter when Tim Black criticized everyone he thought didn't support Nina enough and was very uncool about the terms he used to criticize some people specifically.
Yeah. There was some weird stuff there, that's for sure. And listen, folks, like, it doesn't matter if you loved Nina, if you hated her, if you were somewhere in the middle. Some of the post Nina Turner election talk has gotten way too weird. Okay, she's a progressive who ran an okay campaign and lost. This is very common. This is extremely common. Okay, yes, she out fundraised Chantel Brown for large portions of the campaign. And yes, there were times when her spending could have been slightly wiser or things like that. But some of the criticisms that I've seen are just bizarre, first of all. Like, she shouldn't have had to run a 100% perfect campaign, made every decision perfect. She ran a good campaign. Anybody who knows that knows that. She had plenty of people on the ground. She did a lot of things right, okay? But on the other hand, some of the defenders are also over the top. She also lost.
Yes.
She lost. She lost for a lot of reasons. And the main one was dark money. And we should all be able to unite as leftists about being mad about that without having to fucking fight about it. That's
dark money from Republican donors funneled through a Democrats for Israel PAC.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just break all this down. So the people who support the genocide in the Middle East put all their resources behind stopping Nina Turner.
Yep.
That's the simplest way to put it. And the reason
Brown is pro-Israel. She's transphobic. She's just generally, she's anti-immigration. She's just generally very toxic.
She's ultimately
politically.
She's ultimately acceptable to nice liberal people, but not fundamentally different from a Republican on the policies that matter most in an economic sense.
No, and she's known for corruption. So it's very a shame.
He was being investigated by the FBI during the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest reasons that they dumped so much dark money into negative advertising targeting Nina Turner was to distract from the FBI investigation into Chantel Brown's campaign that came out into Chantel Brown, rather herself, that came out during the campaign.
Yep. So, it's a shame that this election went this way. If you care about, the harm reduction of electoralism. If you don't care, I'm sorry we're talking about it so much, but a lot of people do. So here we are. And because I don't blame you for not caring, to be honest. But yeah. So listen, she lost. That sucks. We shouldn't overly criticize her campaign. It was a pretty good campaign. We shouldn't under criticize her campaign. It had flaws. And we should be clear. And also the main thing that came down on her was this evil dark money that, again, I don't understand why we're having trouble being united as leftists and just condemning that. We should all be, even if you don't care that Nina Turner lost, you should be able to still say, yep, sucks that dark money ruins elections. And if that's your only thought about it, fine.
and people attacking podcasters for not giving enough airtime to Nina Turner. So everybody should know that Savage Joy Marie Mann is one of my favorite people in the world. She was on my old show with my old co-host. I was on her show substituting for Pat one night because he wasn't available to do the news with her.
I'll also point out that we've collaborated with her a bunch of times over at Not Safe for Wonks, and that she's great.
She's a wonderful person. She helped organize the Medicare for All March. She's done lots of great things. She supports and donated to and phone banked for Nina Turner. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the people called out by name for not supporting Nina Turner enough. I mean, she wrote a book where Nina Turner is the hero. Let's not forget that.
Yes, she literally wrote a satire book with Nina Turner as the sort of hero of the story, getting to dunk on people a lot. Yes. Like, she's clearly a fan.
She loves Nina Turner.
It's sad to see so much weird divisiveness around this.
And
it really is.
Weird divisiveness is all there is to it. The same people who are going at some of the same people who are going after some of these folks were going after some of the Fred Hampton left people, and it's just a pain. People clout chasing by trying to talk bad about everybody with a bigger platform than them, basically. And it just worked its way up to Tim, and Tim decided to use it to support what he was saying.
That's just how Twitter is sometimes, unfortunately. And it's very toxic and sad because I know that Tim is not like some terrible person. And that, regardless of him doing this, like, it's not like everything he believes is horrible. But he definitely took the wrong side here and really said a lot of things that he shouldn't have said, arguably, at all.
He chose to punch in every other direction except at the dark money. And I mean, it's really easy to do a show about dark money these days. We haven't yet. We should do a show about dark money one of these days. But it's really easy to do that. I mean, it's really easy to do a show about dark money. Why do you need to do a show calling a bunch of people out by name that you think didn't do enough? I love Savage, but she does not. I don't think she has a huge following in Cleveland. In that her decision to speak up for Nina more on her podcast would have, turned the target voters out there in Cleveland.
No, one person canvassing on the ground would have done more.
I don't have a huge following in Cleveland, to my knowledge. I don't think that I could have turned the tide there.
Listen, Not Safe for Wonks does pretty good on listenership. And what pretty good means is that when we put out an episode, it gets at least 500 listens that day, sometimes up to 2,000 listens the day it comes out. That still is not enough reach, and that's considered pretty good, and we chart and stuff sometimes. Sure. That's not good enough to help Nina Turner get elected.
No.
And that's like, we're like an okay show, you know? But like, that's not good. We couldn't have done anything to really help her get elected with that. Again, one of us just physically going there and canvassing for her would have done a lot more. Yeah, that's just absurd. I think there's a weird disconnect with a lot of this stuff where people kind of have these ideas about the internet and real life and the left and things that just still really don't match up. And I get it, because it's so easy to fall into this kind of thinking sometimes that even I do it occasionally on some issue, and I have to realize that, like, no, regular people aren't on Twitter. You know, like most of my neighbors aren't on Twitter. And if I want to talk to them about this issue, I need to talk to them in a different way, or whatever, you know? And yeah, I just think there's this fundamental disconnect. And honestly, you could see it also in the people that were too overzealous about Nina Turner, to the point of saying things like, she should run for president.
Yeah.
Here's your proof
that
you need to remember this moment. If you had that thought, Nina Turner should run for president, you need to remember this moment and realize that the scale of politics and the way things are connected is not what you thought. It's not what you thought. And that we need to continue to build a working class that is politically motivated, activated, and supported, so that we can get more stuff done and have a conversation like Nina Turner for president that isn't a joke, or maybe a conversation like fuck this country that isn't a joke. But we'll talk about that some other time.
Country is a conversation that needs to be had. There are two approaches traditionally to the legitimacy of the United States. There's this sort of attempt by some on the left to really make the United States a radical and left-wing country in a way that it isn't, and to make some of the founding fathers these sort of left-wing icons, which they really weren't. Thomas Paine was pretty great as far as people in the 18th century went. But once you get
he
past,
still would have been like Ed Markey at best, folks.
well, no, because you got to understand that Thomas Paine went on to the French Revolution and was involved with stuff specifically beyond Ed Markey. But he was not the majority of the founding grifters. The majority of the founding grifters were these really rich aristocratic people, or these people who had risen up through the so-called meritocracy by proving their usefulness to these rich aristocratic power brokers.
And I think that there's something interesting about, talking about the fact that the founding fathers were pushing for something to the left of what a lot of people considered acceptable at the time, but that doesn't make them leftists in the modern sense of the word.
And
that's where I think some people get a little confused.
There is but anyway, that's the one takeaway, this sort of patriotic socialism that people say, well, we can't win elections unless the left is patriotic. But the other end of that goes back to William Lloyd Garrison and before, which is the idea that no, the United States is an illegitimate country built on stolen land with stolen labor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that there's nothing legitimate about a constitution that required indigenous and African genocide.
Right. And it didn't even seek to acknowledge the faults of that.
It's
they could have written a revolutionary constitution that said, hey, up till now, this country has been a mess, and we need to do something about that and acknowledge things like indigenous genocide and abolish slavery from the point of the revolution. They could have done that. They could have had a revolutionary constitution that had that kind of thinking in it, and they chose not to. And when I say chose not to, I want to be clear that they chose not to because, again, there were a couple of people like Thomas Paine saying that they should do that.
Before the actual meeting for the National Constitutional Convention, several states were already working on state constitutions. Some had already ratified them. The first draft of the Pennsylvania state constitution would have outlawed, the way we look at it now, obviously they didn't exist then, but essentially would have outlawed billionaires in the terms of the day.
Mm-hmm.
They would have taken Benjamin Franklin's money and land and divvied it up among the poor. Obviously, Ben didn't like that draft of the Pennsylvania state constitution. But they actually said in the first draft of the Pennsylvania Constitution that great concentrations of wealth create inequality and poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was radicalism. The founding fathers stepped on it. The founding fathers are the people who stopped the real radicalism from flowering.
Yeah. I don't know why
I've never
anyone's,
set
like,
up the audio
defending
like
them.
this. Sorry.
Like, why do we even need to talk about them?
I mean, like, I think it's interesting to learn about history and talk about these things, but I do think that, yeah, like, there's no need to try to
defend them.
rehabilitate or
You don't need to
defend these
defend the founding
people.
fathers ever.
First of all, they're doing fine. They're all dead, and that's
They're
fine.
on, like, a mountain. Or
Yeah, they're on a mountain and something. They're on money. Like, I think
None of us are going to be on money when we're dead.
I think if you're on money, you're probably good and no one needs to defend you.
No.
Like, this guy's fine.
So
He has great PR.
Let me share something important about George Washington, because this is actually a function of that great PR. Almost everyone has been told the same lie in school, which is that George Washington had wooden teeth. George Washington did not have wooden teeth.
He had stolen teeth.
He had stolen teeth. He had teeth stolen from the most vulnerable people possible. But I want to also discuss how extravagant this was at the time. George Washington had a custom-fitted denture, which was very rare in those days, made of hippopotamus ivory, which was not cheap, which had holes custom drilled for like the 4 teeth he had left, so that the few real teeth he had stuck up through his custom denture. But then he had teeth, real teeth. They were not wooden. They were not fake. He had teeth taken from the slaves who worked for him and soldiers who died under his command. So when people talk about George Washington's wooden teeth, it's because they're whitewashing the real story. They do not want you to know that this grisly man walked around with dentures made of teeth stolen from his own slaves and from soldiers under his command who had been killed fighting the British.
That's real normal. Real normal thing to do.
Well, that's how they made false teeth in those days. They ran around battlefields with pliers looking for dead people with some good teeth worth taking. I know, it's not fun. So away from that and back to bashing on Biden. Sorry.
You know, some of those soldiers then did have good teeth too, because so a little known fact is that by the time of the Revolutionary War, and even more so by the time of the Civil War, a lot of soldiers were very into their self-care. They dyed their hair.
Yes.
They, you know, ironed their clothes. They did stuff that you might not expect. These were some vain, especially the officers.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
These revolutionary officers were some vain boys.
Yeah.
Dyeing their mustaches, you name it.
They all competed to try to impress Benedict. A bunch of Revolutionary War officers were all trying to compete to impress Benedict Arnold's wife while Benedict Arnold was escaping to Canada. And then his wife got away too. The only one they caught was the British officer that he was in cahoots with. Benedict Arnold got away because his wife was so hot that all the founding fathers were trying to impress her instead of arresting her and catching Benedict Arnold. And then she got away because she was able to just walk away and escape because they just all thought she was such a big deal.
That's like the people that like you post on Facebook. It's official. My husband and I are splitting up, and they just DM you like, "What's up? You want to come over?" Like that's like the founding fathers were like doing that to Benedict Arnold's wife. Like,
yes,
she's like, "Damn, my husband betrayed the revolution and he's running away. That's crazy." And they're like, "Yeah, you wanna watch Netflix?"
And then
I got an estate,
but they were so busy trying to
stuff.
They were so busy trying to put the make on Peggy that she ran off and went back to Benedict and was like, "Yeah, they didn't realize I was in on it with you."
You know, my theory is that she wasn't originally in on it, but then she was like, "These men are so sleazy. Fuck it. I'm traitor too. I can't deal with this."
If George Washington whistles at me through those awful teeth one more time,
I swear to God, I'm going back to the British. I can't do this.
Oh, God.
Yeah. See, this is why the founding fathers are fun after all, folks. History.
Yeah.
No, but so after all that, first, I do believe that Biden would take our teeth if we died and he needed them. So let's not pretend that Joe Biden is that much better than George Washington.
Joe Biden has the politics of a founding father.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he certainly put a lot of people in forced labor situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which like a lot of people in this country think that they like or want that, but like that's having the politics of a 300 years ago was an asshole then is definitely even more of an asshole now. That's your politics if that's what you're about.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had the radical position, again, not counting Thomas Paine, who was totally against slavery from the beginning, but the radical position among the founding fathers was we should abolish slavery in 20 or 30 years. And the position that was actually reached as a compromise in the Constitution was, well, we'll phase out the international slave trade. So nobody actually decided to really do anything about slavery in the Constitution. It was, well, we'll gradually phase out the slave trade, but that's just because that way the folks in Virginia will make that much more money selling slaves to the rest of the country, which is literally what Virginia had in mind and why it was Virginians who championed eliminating the international slave trade but not abolishing slavery.
Yeah, just brings more of the money home.
Mm-hmm.
None of the cruelty changes, but the money, you know.
It's true. It doesn't change anything, but you're not having to spend all this money kidnapping people anymore because you've got your home supply. But that means you're tearing families apart all the same.
Yeah, nothing else changes. It doesn't improve the system in any way.
No.
And so,
the idea was that the international slave trade was particularly cruel, and it was, but so was, slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a business of cruelty. That's what it was. It was extremely.
And there wasn't anyone at the time of the Constitution who was sitting there saying, why are we talking about abolishing the slave trade in like 1805 when we could be like abolishing slavery?
Mm-hmm.
It's like no one. It's like with some of the recent stuff. There's not somebody in Congress saying, we should cancel rent. People shouldn't owe this stuff. But why are we even BSing about a moratorium? People shouldn't owe this rent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody stood up and really said that.
Yeah.
No, of course not.
Well, I mean, yeah, and it's worth noting too that if we're going to condemn these people, that we should condemn them to the fullest extent, and note that some people will try to say, well, slavery has existed in various forms, blah, blah. Never been anything as horrible as American slavery. Never been anything as horrible as American slavery, especially on that scale. There might have been some king that had like a private group of slaves that were treated horribly. It was not on. There was nothing ever on the scale. The very nature of ancient slavery was very different, and
there's one thing that comes close, and it was the difference between the majority of slaves in ancient Rome and the unlucky handful.
Mm-hmm.
But in Rome, you had what was called Latifundia, which were these big for-profit wheat farms. There were still some of them by the end of the Republic in Italy itself, but most of them were in places like North Africa and Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought that stuff back to Italy by ship. But the farms were all these were like today, big, oppressive, hard labor, monoculture. An owner tells everybody what to do. But slavery on those farms was not fundamentally different from slavery in the Old South. People lived on the farm. In some cases, they worked in chains. They were whipped. They were not expected to live past a certain age, etc. Much like slaves on a cotton plantation in the American South. But a far fewer percentage of Roman slaves were in that situation overall. It wasn't on the same scale.
Yeah. Yeah, the scale really is one of the big differences. And so for these people to sign off on that slavery, the cruelest version of slavery in more or less all of history, these were not good people.
Yeah.
And some of these people, some of the founding fathers were directly involved in slave profiteering. So
George Washington was a successful tobacco farmer in Virginia with everything that entailed at the time.
And a successful cannabis farmer. Did you know that?
Yes, and hemp.
The hemp for sure, but he had those special seeds that he and Benjamin Franklin traded back and forth.
He did. Yes, he did.
Which is kind of funny because even in their day, they were fear-mongering slightly about cannabis. Not much yet.
Yeah.
That would mostly come later, but there was a teeny inkling of it because hemp was considered dangerous to the cotton industry.
Yes, yes, it was. In a lot of ways it was, and they didn't want the competition.
There's been some fear-mongering about cannabis again.
There has been.
Remember, Joe Biden said, I'm going to try to get people out of prison. But now they're trying to put more people in prison.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The repercussions are not funny, but it's always like an absolutely ridiculous argument that doesn't make any sense.
He wants to put more. He wants to put more people in prison for pot.
Mhm.
He wants to open up schools when schools are supposed to open up, no matter what, despite the fact that we are in many parts of the country, the worst part of the plague yet in the U.S. And think about that for a moment.
Mhm.
Remember, I mean, Cog, you're from New York. You remember what it was like. So for Mississippi, this is the worst part of the plague yet.
Yeah.
And not all of these people are not all Trumpers who refuse to get vaccinated.
Yeah, of course not.
No.
There are places in Mississippi where literally, unless you're able to get somewhere or someone is able to get to you, you can't just go to the CVS.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when you look at some of these red states and their vaccination totals, and you look at a state like Mississippi or Texas or Louisiana or Alabama with these huge rural stretches where transportation is not easy to come by, it doesn't make sense to try to blame it all on anti-vaxxers.
And it's not just the transportation. We know that the vaccine rollouts have not been equal.
Exactly.
I'm lucky enough to live in a state where you can go online, easily register to get the vaccine, choose where and when you want to
Yeah.
get it, which vaccine you want, etc. It took them a little while to get that system running smoothly, but they did, and it's it's been easy for everyone for the most part. People in
Yeah.
Arkansas do not have that benefit. A lot of people in Arkansas and Texas and places like that I know are struggling to get the vaccine still. They want it. They want it as badly as anyone. They're scared and they can't get it. And there will be people, especially liberals, but
Yeah.
sometimes leftists, and y'all need to stop, who get on Twitter and say, oh, these anti-vax idiots, they're the problem anyway. Who cares? Hey, we're all suffering under this, and it's not something we should be happy about. We shouldn't be happy about having one more COVID death in this country, even if that person is the biggest Trump idiot. If there were no more COVID deaths tomorrow, we should celebrate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really. And this is the whole thing, is that these people who are cheerleading, and I don't even care about that, because a lot of that stuff is, nobody even knows that's going on except for really online people like us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather talk about the fact that we're not saying the obvious thing, which is we have an out of control new variant.
Yeah.
We know it crosses between vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Who are the largest group of unvaccinated people in the country? Kids 12 and under. All right, where's the place that kids 12 and under are all going to be? School. Okay. We were trying to get all the teachers vaccinated, but now we know that vaccinated people can transmit to unvaccinated people. So we're having all these unvaccinated kids in contact with all these adults who may be able to get them sick.
Yeah.
And despite all this, despite the way the logic of all this works, if you just follow it through, people are saying stuff like, we'll just get kids to mask. Or, well, if we vaccinate all the teachers, the kids won't get sick. And they reduced to saying Trump level stuff like COVID isn't bad for kids. I mean, it's like, you realize what you were saying about people who said stuff like that when Trump was president.
Yeah.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, there's
more
no
money,
self-reflection.
More money and more safety under Trump. Just gonna keep emphasizing that this is not a compliment of Trump, but that's the situation that we're in.
And it seems like everyone's going back to school. Like, has anyone called that off? I don't see it.
No, we're supposed to open schools here this week.
I know New York is going back to school.
Yeah,
I know.
Which is going to be really crazy because of how many people we have. But
I know that there are some places in New York that were back to school before the summer break, even, or at least that's
yeah.
what and that some and that they were rushed in a
Oh
way
yeah.
that wasn't
Well,
good.
yeah. So my mother is a vice principal of a high school, and she was in the school with kids the entire year through. Like
Yeah,
they did like a
Mhm.
alternate system where there weren't as many in the building. But it's a big school.
yeah.
There were still 1,000 kids in the building on a given day.
Right.
They just like split, or yeah, they just split it in half or whatever. So it's like you're still kind of like you're putting people at risk. And this was before they were vaccinated. So we
Mm.
weren't even able to get vaccinated in New York, like teachers and stuff, till like January, February, like late January, maybe early February. So like I don't know, like it's just like basically they didn't care about what would happen to anyone, including like my mom, who like is at home with someone who has emphysema,
Oh my god.
and like said like, no, you can't retire early because like otherwise you'll lose 30 grand of your pension. It's like, what the fuck? It's like for the rest of your life, like you lose 30 grand from that, like for after being a vice principal. It's like, so you're like making people, and there was also like a bill to prevent older teachers from working. My mom was actively trying to like, just be like, hey, maybe listen to this, talk about this, like back in August. And like it's like no one did anything about it. They were just like, oh, like basically like older teachers and high school administrators could have retired, and then there would have been more room for younger teachers who would be better at teaching online. Why don't you just give up the money now? Because it will lead to like better things, not only about money, but not as many people dying.
Yeah.
But like it even financially, I think makes
Yeah.
more sense. I don't know. It's just like, and that's all they care about. I just care about people not getting sick, but like my parents and like everyone else who did get sick, like students lost parents. Their parents are dead now because you like had to, have everyone in school on alternating days, and it's just there were still too many. And like I know, I was talking to another teacher who like lives in my building, and she was at the elementary level, and it was very much the same, in New York City though. And she couldn't get vaccinated until like February. So she was just like working the whole time. Like I don't think most New York schools fully kept a shutdown.
There was a lot of talk from Cuomo and de Blasio about how, we've shut schools down. But when I really talked to people who lived in New York, it was like you said, it was partial shutdowns and small classes with like 5 or 10 kids in a class here and there, and people from home and all sorts of weird mixes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the shutdown never happened on the sort of scale that de Blasio and Cuomo were trying to make people believe it was happening.
Yeah, I was always confused because whenever I talked to an educator, it didn't seem like they were shut down.
Not at the scale that Cuomo and de Blasio wanted people to believe they were. Yeah, we've closed schools because we don't want
like there were precautions made for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard because we have people who that's their only daycare option and their parents have to work.
Yeah.
And when they said stuff like that, you sort of think about it and oh yeah, that means they're saying there are still some kids in school somewhere. And but you don't really think about it at the time. You don't think about it until after, when you started to talk to other people.
Yeah. I mean, I was freaking out about it the whole time because I was like, I hope my mom doesn't die.
Right.
It's just like, this is really like, I was pissed off, whenever someone would talk about, not shutting down or like, I'm not even gonna.
And I don't think we're gonna have another shutdown. I think places like here, my city is 80% vaccinated, which is cool as shit to say, but also it means that nobody wants to put their mask back on even hardly. So like, I feel like we're gonna be lucky if we even get people to do that. There's definitely
So
not going to be another shutdown that people are going to cooperate with hardly at this point.
There's not going to be the kind of shutdown we need anytime in the near future.
Yeah.
I believe that at a certain stage, a shutdown is going to be inevitable, and they're going to have to realize they don't have any other choice, because the Democrats have convinced themselves of the same thing Trump kept saying. The Democrats just haven't said it out loud. Remember how Trump used to say, well, it's just going to disappear one day. One day it's going to be gone. The Democrats have this idea that if we just keep pushing forward, it's going to go away. And their own doctors don't agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Fauci, who's saying that we don't need a shutdown if we just need to get kids to wear masks in schools. Even Fauci is saying we can't vaccinate our way out of it. Yes, everybody should get vaccinated, and that's a good first step. But we can't pretend that it's going anywhere if people don't get vaccinated. If it runs around in people who aren't vaccinated, we're going to get more variants, and it's going to be that much longer before it goes away, which is the science. And that's just the argument for a shutdown. So even when Fauci is saying in the same breath that we need to get kids back into school and they just need to mask up, he's still communicating the science behind the argument for a shutdown.
Yep. But we can't do another shutdown that is just the burden is on people, or
and that's the other problem.
And that's what I see as the big problem.
Up, like, support in their neighborhoods.
Like if they did something like actually, okay, really seriously, it's essential workers only. Those essential workers get overtime for every hour that they work.
Overtime for normal hours, and double time for any necessary overtime.
Exactly. And everybody else, you're going home, and here's your monthly stipend of, $2,000 per person minimum.
Plus canceling rent, so they don't have to pay for rent out of that $2,000.
Yeah, or pay the landlords. I don't even give a shit if you fucking have to give those fuckers money. You got plenty of it. Fucking give the vampires the money, government. You can pony this up instead of buying the new aircraft carrier.
Nationalize the apartment and condominium industry tomorrow.
Honestly, landlords are unnecessary. You don't need them. They don't serve any purpose. They don't make, even in a very strictly capitalist argument, they don't make the market better.
Adam Smith, and you can't get much more capitalist than Adam Smith. Adam Smith said that landlords were leeches on society.
Yep.
That's the kind of argument that landlords make about poor people today, if you want to stop to think about it.
Yep. Anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I've had a lot to say about landlords lately, and I just can't emphasize enough how much landlords are akin to someone with a gambling addiction. They have chosen to live an irresponsible lifestyle off of investment income, which is
not just irresponsible, but genuinely coercive. So this is something that is still happening today in places like India and South Africa, and in some parts of this country even, and definitely in Latin America. But all the way back in the 1840s, in one of the very first socialist texts written, somebody was already saying, look, a French peasant has to buy seed, and he has to pay his aristocratic landlord rent out of what he grows. And then he has to sell whatever he has left. And because he's selling it to the grocer, after the grocer buys it from the farmer, the grocer has to mark it up. So now it costs the farmer more to buy his own produce from the grocer. And so the farmer has to either go into debt or starve to death, or sell his farm and go into business and try to get a job in a city somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this was being taught. They had already defined this problem in the 1840s. This is exactly the problem that a farmer in India has today. This is exactly the problem that a black farmer in rural Mississippi has today.
Mm-hmm. There are farmers who live in food deserts. Think about that.
Is there anything more grotesque?
That's about the state of things that we're in. And that's also like, I mean, that's what we're doing to the global south all the time.
It's like, well, in India, the people who grow the food are starving. And in many cases in India, the people who grow the food are engaged in this same large-scale, one-crop agribusiness where they're just growing to sell, and the nature of the markup of capitalism means that they have to pay more to buy groceries than it cost any of the farmers to sell. And so farmers in India are starving.
Yep. Thanks, capitalism. So, release an invasive species on your golf course.
Among other things. Among other things. And, if you have the ability to influence a local election and to make people notice something important, you should do that, because if you can make something happen in the world, that's good. If you can talk to your Lyft drivers about communism, that's good.
Speaking of which, an abolitionist just won for city council in my neighborhood, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
It was all due to just like community organizers. And she had no financial backing when she started. And basically, like, did not take any donations from landlords, any corporate donations, from the police, from real estate.
And she stuck to her guns in the face of absolutely terrible example being set by a supposedly left-wing mayor candidate who I will not name, and won despite the highest profile so-called left politician in the election imploding, and she stuck to her stuff and just went on through and won.
Yeah, and it could totally happen. Recently, they were doing a recount because the local establishment is pissed because the next part, I don't know what ended up happening because I haven't talked to anyone, but basically and I should probably figure out what happened, but basically they're angry because they want that part of New York for more gentrification. There's like a huge building being built right next to mine that's just luxury condo. The same type of buildings are being built in North Brooklyn. So like this was all just neighbors. A lot of the people who like organized with her too were in the Bronx, and they had lived in Harlem and couldn't afford to live there anymore, and they were helping her. Like that's what happened, and it's like, so we make it happen, and hopefully, they get out of the way, the local establishment, and just stop, just accept what happened. There were like hours and hours on the ground, hours of phone banking, hours of events and marches and standing up for like everything that mattered throughout the whole time.
And
that's what happened.
That's an important part of good news right now. Folks should really think about, we still live in a world where, the Green Party guy could win mayor of a town in Baldwin Park. Green Party won mayor of Baldwin Park in Southern California. Kristen won in Harlem, an abolitionist running against the cops, won in Harlem, despite Eric Adams winning. So when you talk about, when people say that Eric Adams was rejected by Manhattan and try to make it sound like Eric Adams was rejected by all these hoity-toity white people from what we think of as Manhattan, remember, folks, Harlem is on Manhattan.
Yeah, and it's like there are, it takes up a big part of, it's all of Upper Manhattan.
Yes.
It's Harlem. There's Central Harlem. There's West Harlem. There's East Harlem.
Yes.
And they're all very different neighborhoods of people who have lived there a long time, who have been affected deeply by gentrification. There's also Inwood, which is a little bit above there.
And they elected Kristen, and Eric Adams did not win in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. He won in all the other boroughs, but he did not win in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Manhattan, well, yes, the swanky part of New York is in Manhattan. You can't deny that. But there are also neighborhoods on Manhattan Island that have some of the most marginalized people in New York in them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that Manhattan was so willing to reject a cop, because those people have experience with the police.
Yeah.
People in those neighborhoods have experience with the police.
Yeah, I bet if you broke it down, it wasn't the rich neighborhoods rejecting him. They probably loved the cop.
You know they love Eric Adams on Park Avenue.
Yeah.
So, if you have the ability to go out and support some stuff like that in your neighborhood, do it. I've been harping a lot on, these local elections. If you still care about electoralism, and if you don't, you know that I don't judge you. But if you still care about electoralism, stop focusing on these elections that are so hard to win and start focusing on some elections that are highly winnable and local. Because here's the thing. 4 people getting in a car and driving to Ohio and canvassing for Nina Turner helps her some. But if those same 4 people just canvassed for their abolitionist city councilor, that person's odds of winning went up by 10, 20% in some cases from just a dedicated group of people doing something like that.
There are places in the Midwest where a city council election or a city treasurer election or a school board election can be decided by 50 votes, 100 votes.
I spoke to someone in Kentucky that's a city commissioner that or he's on the city, but he has some position like that. They have slightly different names in some jurisdictions, but he has one of those local positions. They literally elected him after early voting had started.
Mm-hmm.
His campaign began after early mail-in voting had started. People were looking at the candidates for one particular seat and saying, these people suck. And they said, let's find someone in the community who's involved and in politics as an activist and try to encourage people to write them in. And it worked because the town they live in is small. Yep. That shit's possible when you live in a town that small. So there you go. Think about stuff like that, folks. And, another thing that you might be capable of doing is going on over to Patreon and helping out this show.
Definitely. I have a link in there now. That link should be good. That's me. If you could sign up and help us support if you're able, we'd appreciate it. If you could retweet it now and then, we'd appreciate that too. That's what that Patreon is what pays for my StreamYard, which is what keeps us on the air. It's also where I get the little bit of mutual aid money I have to share around. So, that's you're helping me keep the show on the air. You're helping me with a few incidental expenses that would otherwise have to come out of my pocket. And, you're making sure that I have mutual aid money for people who need it.
And if there's enough of that, a little of that goes to me and my groceries. So,
true.
I appreciate it too. Carl, you got anything you want to plug?
No, I'm good. Not at this time.
follow Call on Twitter
Okay.
at Book Syrup.
Book Syrup.
Yes, definitely follow Call. The golf takes are great. There are no better golf takes.
I haven't been doing that many of them recently. I've been more so making fun of the Democrats for eating ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream
And that's
take.
fair. Ice cream takes are
Something that
good.
should be addressed as
Mhm.
well.
There are so many feral pro golf trolls out there that I could see how that would get tiring after a while.
Well, you know, I'll post again soon.
Yeah. Golf will still be there.
Eventually, I'll mention it.
Kennedy, any final thoughts?
I think this has been a great show, and I appreciate everybody for watching.
Thanks.
I will just add once more, just in case the link doesn't work. Do give the show, if you can, do give the show your support on Patreon, patreon.com/eclecticradical. And thank you for watching. And I hope everybody has a great night. We'll tweet at you.
Bye, y'all.